Welcome to the RAF podcast, where we bring you insightful discussions on road safety, responsibility, and awareness. As Easter approaches, thousands of faith based travelers will be hitting the road for religious gatherings and family reunions. But with increased traffic comes increased risks. How can we ensure safe journeys for everyone? What lessons can we learn from past accidents? And how can we prevent tragedies this year? In this special episode, we dive into the crucial road safety tips, explore the role of the Road Accident Fund, and provide expert advice for faith based organizations traveling in large numbers. Stay with us as we break down everything you need to know to make this Easter travel season safe and incident free. Welcome to the RAF podcast. Today with me, I have Mr. Siphamandla Gumbi, who is the Senior Manager for Road Safety at the Road Accident Fund. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's great to have you here. It's always insightful when we have a representative from the Road Safety Department because we learn so much about the importance of road safety. So it's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
So before we get into, talking about the intricacies of the Easter period, can you tell us a little bit more of your work as a senior manager for road safety?
I think as we would remember that the role of the Road Accident Fund is to compensate people who've been involved in road accidents, but also our act requires of us to make a contribution to road safety. So we do that by identifying risk areas.
Okay.
Basically, what we do is that we look at the statistics in terms of where the hotspots are, what the causes of those hotspots are, and then we try and come up with interventions. Because if we can remember, the country spends over 200 billion rands in crashes per annum. That is the money that the RAF pays, the money for emergency services. People have to go to hospital. When people die, they have to be buried. When families are left without a breadwinner, they have to be fed. So there's quite a lot of cost associated with the crashes. So in the country, we spend over 200 billion rands.
Wow.
So our responsibility as the RAF is to make a contribution to reducing that amount, but also specifically to reduce the risk that the RAF faces, because we are required to assist people who've been involved in accidents.
Yes.
And in doing so, the funds are not unlimited. As you know, we get a portion of the fuel levy that comes to the Road Accident Fund to assist us in doing that. But for us to be able to assist everybody, we need quite a lot of money. So our responsibility is to identify risk areas and then come up with initiatives to try and curb the spread of road crashes, basically, in short.
And how do you identify these risk areas, and how do you determine what interventions you're going to implement in those areas?
There are two ways. We look at the statistics. So looking at the statistics is reactive. So an accident has already taken place.
Yes.
And then we look at the trends in terms of the number of crashes that take place in that particular spot. And then based on that, we then try to identify what are the causes or the possible causes of the crashes. And then we sort of then come up with programs to try and then address that particular issue. But we also do proactive initiatives where based on the vulnerabilities. For example, there could be a school that's close to a busy road. There may not have been an accident, but you can always see that this is a
risk.
This is a risk area. Then we sort of then work with the schools, we work with the communities to then say what can be done to try and prevent the accidents from taking place. So yeah, we've got both reactive and proactive ways in which we do that. And then out of that, we then work with different stakeholders, because as the adage always goes, road safety is everybody's responsibility.
Yes.
RAF is only a contributor, even in terms of the act. So we cannot be able to do everything and be everywhere.
Yes.
So we make a contribution. In doing so, we work with different communities, we work with different stakeholders, and then we come up with things that we think can be able to work within the budget that is allocated to us.
Okay, let's go back into the Easter period. Can you tell me a bit more about the stats from last year in terms of, road fatalities, accidents, etc.?
Stats are something else because there's a lot of things that contribute to stats. For example, recently we've had a lot of multiple fatal accidents.
Yeah.
Where you have a lot of people who die based on the type of accident that take place. For example, if you look at the year before, if we start in 2023, in the 4 days that we had Easter, we had about 284 people who were killed during that time, which is quite high. But last year it shot up to 335.
Oh wow! So it's not even going down; it keeps.
So it went up, but it's also because of the multiple crashes that we have, where you've got a lot of people who die, where there are mass deaths that take place in that particular accident. But generally, I mean, if you look at it, we have about 215, 220 people who get killed a week in South Africa. But if you look at it during an Easter period, and you've got 284 in 4 days,
that is,
if you compare the numbers, that's quite high.
That's quite high.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that these accidents go up, especially during the Easter period?
Look, there are multiple reasons, but I think a lot of it is historical. Because in South Africa, generally, you've got people who have got multiple homes. You work and live in Johannesburg, but your parents or your other home is in Limpopo or in KZN. What that means is that people always use the Easter period to then travel back to their families.
Yes.
And others use the Easter period to go on holiday. But over and above that, we've got religious beliefs that contribute. Because the nature of our society is that people have got religious beliefs, and then that is accompanied by pilgrimages.
Yes.
Where people have to travel to certain places in order to observe certain pilgrimages. And that unfortunately takes place during Easter.
Yes.
And then you've got extended traffic volumes. You've got issues of roadworthiness of vehicles. You've got issues of the fact that people are just going everywhere.
Yeah.
And some people are not used to that because he goes home to work, which is 20, 30 kilometers. And now you have to be doing 600, 700 kilometers in high traffic, etc. And then there are issues associated with that.
So there's a lot of congestion on the roads because, as you say, some people are making a pilgrimage and they're going off in these long distances that they're not used to.
Yes.
What are the other common mistakes that drivers make when they're traveling long distance?
You know, one of the things that... over and above the issue of speeding, you know, we've spoken a lot about speed. Speed kills, you know, those kind of things. Everybody sort of can sing it.
Yeah.
But there are other things that people always overlook. I'll make an example. 54% of accidents that take place where a vehicle was a problem is due to tires. And it's not only because of tire defects that we know, which is a smooth tire, but sometimes you've got bulges in the tire. Sometimes you've got cracks in the tire. Sometimes you've got a tire that looks okay in your natural eyes, but the tire has long expired. Because in as much as a tire does not have an expiry date per se, but after 6-7 years of using a tire, or the tire even being in your car as a spare tire, you need to start looking at making sure that you change that particular tire. So tires play a very important role in terms of crashes, especially during Easter. Especially, one year I made an observation. It was not Easter, but it was mostly during festive season, where I drove from Messina to come to Johannesburg. What you see on the road are the trailers that are parked on the side of the road because it's either broken or something has happened. And a lot of it has to do with an axle that has collapsed.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with the tire that has collapsed. Why is that? It is mostly because a lot of trailers are not being used on a daily basis. A trailer sits in the garage. Sometimes it's sitting in the sun and the tires brittle and they crack. And then it's Easter time, then you get your trailer, you want to
For
move.
the first time in 6 months.
The trailer has been sitting there, it's not been used, and then you've got those kind of problems that unfortunately follow us. So then, of course, other things like speed, other things like weather, other things like making sure that your vehicle is roadworthy, etc. They contribute. But there are specific things that I think people need to sort of be careful of.
Yeah, and I think vehicle roadworthiness is a very important one. And would you be able to share with us? We've spoken about tires. I've seen people with tires that are bald, like there's no tire left, and they are traveling. But outside of checking your tires, what else can a person do to make sure that their vehicle is roadworthy, especially for long distance travel?
Small things such as the making sure that you've got proper lighting, because a lot of accidents take place because someone couldn't properly see. You might find that your lights are not working properly, or the people who are following you are not able to see your vehicle. Things like wipers, working wipers are very important, especially during this rainy season.
Yes.
We've seen rains that are unprecedented, basically. I mean, we are now getting into April, but it's still heavily raining, which is something that is not common, especially for the weather patterns that we have in this country. But the most important thing I also want to emphasize is that it's not only the boldness of the tires that's a problem. Yes, it is a problem, but bulges, cracks, expiry, and the tires that are repaired on the sides are quite a big problem. Another thing that I would like to highlight is people who have a tire burst, not a tire burst, but a tire puncture.
Yes.
And then, this thingamajig that you just put on the side that is meant to be a temporary repair for you to get to the nearest tire fitment center and change your tire. But you find that someone does that and then it's done.
I'm guilty of that.
Unfortunately.
I am guilty on that, and I am working on fixing that because I bought those tires last year, and literally in December I had that a huge pin went into my tire. And then I went to a local garage and then they patched it. So now I keep telling myself, when I have the money. And also, I was not educated on that. I did not know that continuing to drive that car with that wheel with only a patch is actually quite dangerous. And I don't think a lot of people know that. My mother even said, oh, I didn't know that. I've been driving with that thing in for years and I didn't know that it's actually such a big risk,
So the principle is that a tire has to be repaired from inside. Once a tire is repaired from outside, you must always know that you've got a problem in your hands. And unfortunately, it's one of the things that contribute to what we normally call tire bursts, which I indicated earlier that it contributes about 54% of crashes where a vehicle was a problem. So it is something that we always overlook, sometimes because of ignorance, sometimes because of economic issues, but it's unfortunately something that cost life and injury in most cases.
Okay. Let's go back to the Easter period and, people traveling for, their religious engagements that they will be taking part in. How can drivers ensure that their church members, community members that will be traveling to these places are safe?
Look, there are two things that I think I would like to highlight. The driver has to be fit and the vehicle has to be fit.
Yeah.
That combination for me is important. Another thing that as the Road Accident Fund we've started initiating in the past 2 years is to pick up from stats the contribution of health
Okay.
in accidents. There's a lot of people who get involved in accidents not because they are bad drivers, but because they are unhealthy. Your eyes contribute to the accident. Sometimes you find a person who would sit on a couch and within 10, 15 minutes is snoring.
Yeah,
It's easy
fatigue.
for us to say, oh, this person is lazy or he's tired. But sometimes it's because of the internal medical issues that he has that contribute to crashes.
Those underlying issues.
So there's global statistics indicate that up to about 20 to 30% of accidents that take place, there is something to do with health, because people have got diabetes, people have got hypertension, people they've got iron levels that are uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those things lead to what we call chronic fatigue.
Yes.
Some people have epilepsy, some people have poor eyesight. So that is why, as you know, at the Road Accident Fund, we have a clinic, a mobile clinic, which we are working with transporting associations to test different drivers in terms of their health status. We cannot reach all the drivers, unfortunately.
Yes.
We only have 3 buses. We have over 11 million drivers in the country. But the purpose is to always educate people about health. So I suppose if I'm a driver and I'm going to be taking people for 700 kilometers, I need to also make sure that I'm healthy.
Yes.
I'm fit. I can see my health status is quite okay. So we call upon transporting companies,
Yes.
trucking companies, bus companies, taxi associations. Please make sure that over and above just making sure that your guy is available to drive, but make sure that he also has health issues sorted out beforehand. If people have got medication that they take, they need to make sure that they take that medication. If people have to make sure that they do test before, let's try and support those initiatives. But also something very, very important. One of the tests that we do in the bus is that we test people for hypertension. And the question that is asked to a person who is tested is, how long ago did they take an energy drink? Because 4 out of 5 people who would be tested within 2 to 3 hours of having taken an energy drink, their hypertensive level is high. Not because some people have hypertension, but it would show results of someone having hypertension because of the effects, the caffeine and the sugar that it has in your body. In as much as everybody, as soon as they hit the N1, the N3, they get into the petrol station, they go to the shop, and they come out with an energy drink. We discourage that quite a lot.
Okay.
So a simple thing such as water is the best fluid that you can be able to take, that will keep you awake, that will help you to be able to concentrate. If you can, maybe a little bit of coffee, but not too much as well, because information and data does indicate that those things have got negative effect in our bodies.
Doesn't stress also spike your hypertension?
It does.
If you don't normally, and then that day the person goes to the wellness bus, maybe they're having a stressful day and then it spikes.
It also does, yes.
So then do we encourage people to go for a second opinion, especially in terms of the blood pressure and the cholesterol checks?
So in cases where a person is found to have adverse numbers in terms of their readings, they are always encouraged to then go to a local clinic where they can be able to verify the results and make sure that if the pattern shows that the person has got continuous numbers that are adverse, then they can be able to go into treatment or to take medication, whatever it is. So going back to your initial question, the driver has to be fit.
Yes.
Medically, the driver has to be fit in terms of their ability to drive. Obviously, you can't take... I remember an accident that took place in one of the towns in Pongola recently, where a 19-year-old was driving children to school. And he had an accident with the truck, and 19 kids were actually killed. In fact, 21, 19 kids plus 2 teachers were killed in that particular accident. So experience is also important.
Yes.
Not that people who are experienced don't have accidents, but sometimes you also need to look at the responsibility that you're giving to
Yes.
a 20-year-old, even if they have a driving license. But what type of experience do they have to can drive a bus to take people 700-800 kilometers away?
Yes.
So driver fitness is important, but also vehicle fitness is important. And vehicle fitness talks to the roadworthiness of a vehicle, which we've spoken about.
What else can drivers do to ensure that, their health is in check, their eyesight is in check? Are there any other things for long distance drivers, especially to do to take care of themselves?
Okay. So, look, as I indicated earlier, we only have 3 buses which can cover so many drivers. And in South Africa in general, a lot of our drivers are males. What that means is that a lot of them are not, it's not a regular thing for them to go to clinics.
Yeah.
So what we're calling upon drivers themselves, but also driving companies, is to encourage drivers over and above just the normal days when they are off, to have sessions where they are tested. But as an individual, you also have a responsibility to take care of your own health in the type of food that you eat, in the type of fluids that you take, to make sure that you take healthy fluids such as water,
Yes.
such as just tea, and as I indicated, to avoid fizzy drinks, to avoid energy drinks, etc. But also just normal exercise.
Yes.
And by exercise, I don't mean running 12 kilometers. Even just normal walks, stretches. We encourage that quite a lot to make sure that the blood flow is always adequate in your body.
Yeah.
Because a driver who's driving from here to Cape Town, even though he will be taking breaks in between, but it means that you're going to be sitting in the same posture for a very long period of time, sometimes for up to 2 days. So you do need to make sure that when you stop, you don't just stop and just stand around.
You're stretching.
Stop, stretch, move around. If you can, just take a 1 minute sprint and come back. Those kind of things, menial as they might look, but they have a big contribution in terms of making sure that they keep you healthy, they keep you awake, and they basically make sure that you are able to take people to their final destination.
I heard some really great stories when I interacted with the wellness bus. And it was actually from a young female bus driver. We were actually getting more of those young women who are driving either trucks or buses long distance. And the positive short story she shared with me was that the bus actually provided a safe haven for her as a female driver when she does need to rest, because there aren't a lot of stops in which she feels safe as a woman to actually just take a breather and rest, and encouraged more of that in the initiative. Another positive story is just seeing all these long distance drivers, people who will tell you that I've never had time to go and get my eyes checked. I didn't know that I needed glasses. And they're walking away with glasses and they have better vision and that they can drive better. So I'm glad that this initiative has been introduced to assist especially our long distance drivers.
True. In fact, talking about people not being aware that they need glasses, vision is something strange, because you get used to poor vision and subconsciously you think that's how you're supposed to see. Only because we've gone to places where we tested people and people are kicking and screaming and saying, my eyes are fine, I don't need to be tested. And when a person comes out with glasses and they start saying, wow, I didn't know that I couldn't see. So it's quite important, that initiative, in terms of making sure that sometimes we make people aware of things that they were not even aware about their own bodies.
As a passenger who's planning to travel long distance these Easter holidays with my family in a large group, what are my responsibilities in making sure that me and the group of people that I'm traveling with arrive safely to our destinations? What do we need to look out for?
I'm glad you asked that question, because we don't have a culture in South Africa of making sure that we probe the vehicle that we're going to be using, the driver who's going to be taking us. Before answering your question, I'll give you an example of parents who bring in their kids to a scholar transport driver, and all they do is just to put the child in the gate and not look at how many kids are in this car. What is the condition of the car? What is the condition of the driver who's taking responsibility for all the lives that are taking their children to school? And we've seen the results of that in terms of the type of crashes that we get and the type of drivers that you find were part of
and
the
condition of the vehicle.
And the condition of the vehicle.
We used to sit on the engines.
Unfortunately, it's still the case.
So that engine behind the front seat. Yes. Yeah.
So people have to take responsibility, man, for their trips. There is nothing wrong with a passenger who's booking a vehicle to say, please give us a profile of the driver. Let's see who's taking us to the place. What type of accidents have they had in the past, or type of incidents that they've had in the past.
Are we able to get record of that? Look, in terms of the incidents or accidents that they've had in the past?
It depends on the relationship between the booking person and the transporting company.
Okay.
Because the transporting company should be able to have a record of the particular individual. Okay. So there is nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, you should be able to go to the transporter and say, give me the profile of the person, without being too intrusive in terms of their medical history and so on. But just the basic information in terms of how old they are, what type of incidents they've had, what trips are they taking prior to them taking us. Because you might find someone is arriving from Polokwane on Friday, and they must drive it to Bloemfontein the following day. What type of rest have they had? Those kind of things, because they look very menial, but they're quite important.
Very important.
And unfortunately, they contribute to the type of crashes that we see.
What are some of the warning signs a passenger could see that a driver is dealing with, extreme fatigue, and what can they do about it?
A lot of accidents that take place, you always hear stories of, I saw this guy the way he was driving. You could actually see that the car, people will always see the warning signs. We had an accident last week where a bus was trying to avoid hitting a vehicle, and it swerved and capsized, and 16 people died. When we saw the interviews being done with the passengers, because this is a commuting bus that was taking people to work on a daily basis, they were indicating that we've complained about this driver on a regular basis because of the way he's been driving, etc., and etc. I'm not saying that's factual or not, but I'm just saying the signs will always be there. So if a driver is fatigued, it's not always the first thing that happens and then an accident takes place. It's a build-up of behaviors that you can be able to see. So people need to get to a point where our focus shouldn't be, we want to get there at 7 o'clock. Our focus should be, we want to get there safely.
Yes.
So if you do see that a person is fatigued, there is nothing wrong with saying, can we just give you 30 minutes to take a quick nap? And then let's see what happens after that.
Are there any regulations in place for, drivers to rest? And how do we then ensure compliance with those regulations?
Look, in South Africa, we don't have regulations per se. In some other developed countries, you find that commercial drivers have a certain amount of kilometers that they can drive before they rest. So a
Okay.
police officer, one of the things they ask you would be to show evidence that you've rested and where did you rest before they can allow you to proceed. We don't have that in South Africa, unfortunately, but a recommended time period is that if you're driving long distance, at least every 200 kilometers or every 2 hours, just take a rest and just take a break so that you can be able to allow your body to recuperate a bit. It's not based on any regulation per se, but it's based on just a safe practice.
What role do seatbelts play, in preparing for a long distance trip or any trip really? What is the importance of wearing a seatbelt?
One of the biggest killers today in most of our crashes is non-compliance with safety belt. In fact, just last week there was a crash that took place on Church Street in Pretoria, where a taxi hit a tree, and the taxi was not driving very fast. But believe you me, we had 4 deaths that resulted from that crash, and of the 4 deaths were precisely because of not wearing safety belts. A passenger was sitting behind the driver, flung and hit the driver from the head at the back, and both of them died from the accident. And a mother who was sitting with a child in the front seat also hit the windscreen, and they both died. And this is not an accident that took place on the N1 where people were driving 120 or 140. It is a crash that took place on Church Street in town where people could not have been driving even 100 kilometers per hour. So we can never overemphasize wearing safety belts, especially for children, because a lot of our vehicles, especially the modern vehicles, are in such a way that as soon as you get into a car, you are forced to wear a safety belt. There are people who would then put a safety belt at the back, which is something that we discourage. There are parents, especially fathers, that you see over weekends who want to look cool by driving, and the child is standing on the side. Unfortunately, those lead to quite a number of head injuries. They lead to quite a number of fatalities, and we want to discourage those things. A lot of the taxis that we have in South Africa today, and just public transport in general, they come with safety belts. But unfortunately, because of non-utilization, you find that safety belts are somewhere under the seats. But we want to always encourage people to say, number one, it's legal, but number two, it can save your life. Let's make sure that we wear safety belts all the time. And this thing of passengers who are sitting at the back of a vehicle not wearing safety belts is also a big problem. Because over and above them, people look at, there's no windscreen to hit, but the crash between the two heads of the person sitting in front and the person sitting at the back often leads to quite a lot of serious injuries and sometimes fatalities. That is why I don't know how else to overemphasize the issue of safety belts, because we have seen cases where they save people's lives. A safety belt can save you from head injuries, from brain damage, brain injuries, etc. But it can also save you from death. So we always encourage people to wear it. And also, on a side note, in terms of your claim to the RAF, remember when you come to the RAF to claim, we look at fault.
Yes.
So not wearing a safety belt is also, it means that you were at fault. So that means as the RAF, we can also reject your claim, or we can maybe apportion it because you contributed to the type of injuries because of not wearing a safety belt.
I don't think a lot of taxi passengers are actually aware that they should be wearing their seatbelts. As you said, it's hiding somewhere inside the couch. You don't see it, and you don't feel the need. And you even hear stories of people sitting in the front with the driver, and the driver telling them, "Hey, if you wear a seatbelt, you're wasting my time. Like, why are you wearing a seatbelt?" So it also brings me to something that you actually made me think about, because we spoke a lot about, traveling long distances and preparation for that. But I want to touch on something that I've seen as a trend on social media, is the actual state of taxis, of minibus taxis. I don't know if you've seen any of these videos, but it is horrendous. It is quite scary. The gear doesn't work. The gear is all the way on sleep mode. People are sitting on crates instead of chairs. Windscreen wipers are not working. There's so many issues. Is there anything that perhaps we are doing to help with that? Or is there any education that is happening for drivers to make sure that their taxis are roadworthy?
It's a matter of money over lives, which is the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in. There is no amount of education that can be made available to people who don't value, number one, their own lives, but also people who don't value the life of their passengers. So it is just a matter of re-emphasizing. But also, I think law enforcement authorities have a responsibility to make sure that they take a whip on such behavior.
Yeah.
Because to see a vehicle like that passing through a roadblock and maybe just being issued with a fine is not good enough. So it is unfortunately the responsibility of law enforcement authorities to make sure that such vehicles do not belong on the road and they need to be removed with immediate effect. Because ultimately, what you are talking about, having witnessed on social media, is something that is extremely widespread, unfortunately.
It is.
And it is something that has to be curbed if lives have to be preserved. We had a lot of these things before a program that was done by the Department of Transport, the taxi recapitalization process, where taxi operators were encouraged to bring an old vehicle, and they were given a certain amount of money to go back and then maybe apply for a new one or exit the industry altogether. And I think it's been, 10, 15 years now, and you're beginning to see the trend again where you just see moving coffins. And like I indicated when we started, road safety can never be one person's responsibility. So everybody who has to play a part must come together and make sure that, because education alone will not be able to assist. Law enforcement has to come into the fore. Maybe the Department of Transport has to revisit taxi recapitalization process. But also taxi associations. What responsibility do they take when you can actually see that this taxi does not belong on the road? Yes, this person is your member, is an operator, but you can actually see that this taxi is a danger to society. What are they doing on their side to make sure that these taxis, particularly, it's not only taxis, but you see this in buses. I don't know how many times you've driven next to a truck, especially these coal-moving trucks, where you can actually see that one of the tires is gone. And because they've got two wheels next to each other, the other one is holding. And so it's something that is unfortunately there, but it needs all of us to work together to make sure that we stop it.
So for a driver preparing for a long distance journey, what emergency items do they need to have within their vehicle, and what measures can they take should there be an accident or an incident that happens with the vehicle?
The important thing, I think, is planning your trip. If you're traveling to Bothaville in the Free State, you need to, number one, plan your route in terms of, I'm going to go via this route. What police station is there? What hospital is there? So in some cases you find that the emergency numbers are not the same. Of course, for the police, it's 10 111 all over the country, but medical emergency services, the numbers are different. If you're planning your route, you need to know what emergency numbers do I need in case of any emergency that I might face. But in the vehicle itself, one of the important things, particularly for public transport, but also important for even private transport, to have a fire extinguisher in case of any fires that happen.
Okay.
I don't know how many times you've seen a vehicle burning on the side of the road.
No.
And if you've got a small fire extinguisher, you find that you could actually extinguish that fire before it actually became a blaze. But also first aid kits that, you can buy those in any hardware store, which you can keep in the vehicle. In case anything happens, you are able to then be able to assist people. But also, most importantly, something that people don't look into is to make sure that in preparing for your trip, you have the spare wheel, you've got the necessary tools for you to be able to, in case you've got any emergency, you are able to change tires and to do all the necessary things that needs to be done. It's small things again, but which, imagine if you're traveling and you've got a tire puncture, you've got no jack in your car.
Yeah.
The 2 hours that you're going to wait while waiting for assistance, it means that you might find yourself having to wait in an unsafe place, and a lot of other things might end up happening. Or because you've missed your time, when you start the trip again, it means now you're driving faster because you're rushing to reach the target, because you've set a target that you're going to arrive at a particular time. So again, it's small things, but if we do take care of them, they have a bigger impact. Yes.
What advice would you give to both drivers and passengers that are going to be traveling for this Easter season?
It's just re-emphasizing specific things that we've spoken about, that people must know the route that you're going to take, estimate the amount of time that you're going to be traveling, make sure that you're fully prepared in terms of your emergency kits that you're going to have in your vehicle. If you have the opportunity, please check the profile of the driver and just know the vehicle that you're going to be using, because it's quite important. The roadworthiness of the vehicle can never be overemphasized.
Yeah.
And it's not something that requires of you to take your vehicle for roadworthy testing. But if you take your vehicle to a tire fitment center, for example, they can be able to check quite a number of things over and above just the tires. Serviceable items, you can just make sure that those are also looked into. Because a small thing that happens on the road can have quite a devastating impact in the long term. So it's important that in preparation for your trip, as a passenger, as a driver, you do your homework and know the vehicle, know the driver, know the route, and make sure that you're fully prepared for the road.
How are we, as the Road Accident Fund and the Road Safety